Hi, Laura Holyoke back here again to present to you the third part of our trifocal frame called the Medical Clinical Organismic Frame Lens. So this one looks at as an organization as if it were a person. The organizations have life cycles, self-concepts that are unique to the history and languages and health status. So Manfred gets DeVries and Miller think of dysfunctional organizations in the terms of abnormal psychology. So there are paranoid organizations, depressive organizations, and schizoid organizations. So sick organizations, like sick individuals, may not perceive themselves as needing help. I also believe that organizations can be crisis prone. Additionally, organizations have life cycles, as do individuals. So here's one way of looking at an organizational life cycle. That when it first starts, these are the visions and values, that's what forms its foundation. Norms tend to emerge after a couple, 3 years, 2, 3 to 5 years, and they have a boom period. If they survive, organizations we know have a high infant mortality rate, if you will. As organizations go through their teenage years, they're really highly cohesive workforce, easy to adapt and change to what's going on in the external environment. They're highly successful, meaning that their values align with their actions. Then they hit a point of stability and sometimes become complacent. So organizations can decline, just like individuals can, if we don't take care of our health. The values and actions may get out of alignment. Chaos may happen. So organizations get to the point where they either need to revamp or bust. So they can have 3 choices according to this graph. They can have some sort of sustained growth again, they can barely exist, or they can go out of business. This organizational life cycle is both from Cameron and Quinn, as well as Larry Greiner. And Greiner has been kind of a leader in terms of organizational life cycles. So they say that there are different stages in organizations, and also they go by from small to large organizations. So there's first an entrepreneurial stage, if you will, highly creative, and that they say that to move from one stage to the next usually involves some sort of a crisis. So the entrepreneurial stage only can last so long, or they then run into a crisis and they need leadership to step up. And then they have more of a clear direction, and then they have a crisis that they need delegation and somebody to control. And once they have, excuse me, not somebody to, but these are the internal controls that we talked about. So once those internal systems are put in place, there's formalization, and then crisis hits that there could be too much bureaucracy or red tape. And so then we have a need for to stabilize and to really develop the teamwork. This is the elaboration stage. So then they can streamline into small company thinking. They can move into continued maturity, or an organization can decline. Here's another way of looking at organizations, both size and as they go through a life cycle. So this came from Richard Daft's DAFT work on organizational theory and design. And he says, when an organization starts out in terms of bureaucracy, it's really not bureaucratic. And as the organization grows into maturity, becomes very bureaucratic. You can see that the division of labor in small organizations that are just starting out, there's often overlapping tasks. And then departments come to life, and then many departments, and then sometimes extensive job departments, small jobs, many descriptions. Centralization happens, formalization, that many organizations don't start out with written rules. And then as it moves on, that we do need rules, and then policy and procedures. So you can see and probably look at organizations and be able to tell where they are, and these things may make more sense to you. I think you remember talking about margin, the Swenson's margin equation, and we talked about individuals and their resources minus load ended up in positive or negative margin. So organizations are the same, where resources is actually the capacity of the organization to pay people to take on work, to do certain amounts of work. The load is the demand of the work or the demand of people's salaries. And what happens is if an organization goes into negative margin, one of two things happens. Either collapse, the organization collapses, bankruptcy, or fundamentally changes how it operates, or an organization may need to downsize or subcontract out because it has too much demand on it and can't keep up with the demand. So future shock also happens. This is talking about, so Toffler, Toffler, wrote the book Future Shock about 50 years ago, I think. So it's describing the various problems that arise when people deal with more change than they can metabolize. And this is what happens in not only individuals, but also in organization. So increasing magnitude of change consists in our lives and organization in terms of volume, the number of changes we face, that there's less and less adjustment time before the next change comes along. And then also the complexity of the changes that comes along and what those changes are built upon. I am not sure who wrote this statement, but I think it is brilliant. That is that organizational health is the presence of active and valued healing processes which continually repair and prevent serious organizational injury and disease. This looks at the organization as an organism, or that through the organismic lens. So highly dysfunctional organizations are either controlling, rigid, or exclusive, or fuzzy, confusing, and boundary-free. So either extreme leads to organizational dysfunction and enslaves people in different ways. White wrote about organizational boundaries, and I also think these can be pretty easily applied to groups, departments, within organizations. So they help us determine if people are in or out of an organization. That is the family system, in and out of a group. It's also kind of the skin that contains the organization and distinguishes it from the outside environment. So let's talk more about this. So White says that if you think of a continuum, on one end of the continuum are too open or porous organizations, and on the other end of that continuum are enmeshed or closed organizations. So when an organization is porous or a group is porous, there's no clear sense of mission or goals. Ideas and values leak out, especially the good ones, they're not contained. There are high levels of rationalization and low levels of disclosure and intimacy among members of the group or organization. Compartmentalization of work results in low levels of internal interaction and interdependence. People keep to themselves. You also tend to have hypothetically invisible organizational members who have retired on the job by removal of all significant job responsibilities. So these may be people that have had everything taken away from them. Low levels of organizational identity, and not identifying and being proud of your organization, and then absent or sporadically involved leadership are all characteristics of porous organizations. On the other end are enmeshed and closed organizations, and these characteristics are low boundary permeability, aggressive gatekeeping functions, really hard to get into these organizations and or groups, extreme demands for loyalty in terms of time, emotional commitment to the organization. They tend to be conservative, defensive, reactive, and resistant to change. There's a focus on the group rather than individuals. Minimal internal boundaries that provide access to private space. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. The management style is that the workers must be controlled, usually by fear, force, or charismatic persuasion. And then the control is through tyrannical, authoritarian, or manipulated consensus. And there's usually a harsh response to behavior that deviates from norms in these organizations. Again, these are both ends of a continuum, and there is always a happy medium. I posted in our readings. These are Albrecht's 17 syndromes of organization dysfunction. I won't go through them, but this again looks at an organization as if it were an organism. So organizations can have attention deficit disorder. There may be a caste system within organizations. There may be a general depression that is nothing to believe in. An organization may be fat, dumb, and happy. If it ain't broke, let's don't fix it. An organization may be characterized as having anemia, that only the deadwood really survives in it. The geriatric leadership, that is people that are retired on the job. And then additional ones, the loony CEO makes crazy. Monopoly mentality is our divine right. The one-man band, which is Clint Eastwood rules here. So these can be quite entertaining, and I would invite you to have a little fun with looking at either the Devil Wears Prada or an organization that you may be familiar with in terms of what syndrome they may fall under. Finally, LaRange and Nelson came up with indicators that organizations are declining, and maybe some or any or all of these. So having excess personnel around, too many people and not enough work. Maybe tolerance of incompetence, that it's okay that people don't know how to do their job. We're declining anyway. Could be that there are cumbersome administrative procedures. Disappropriate staff power. So the power resides really where it should not be. A replacement of substance with form. The scarcity of clear goals and decision benchmarks. There may be fear of embarrassment and conflict, loss of effective communication, and then finally, an outdated organizational structure. So again, something to look for, something to notice if you see it around you. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for being here.